Today, we're going to start evaluating the book Cold Case Christianity. It's a book where a homicide detective evaluates the claims that are made in the Gospels. Now, this book was suggested by a fan of the show, more or less.
We have substantial evidence that Jesus Christ died and was resurrected exactly as the Gospel accounts say they do. And since you mentioned that issue of forensics, I'm going to mention a book here that you might want to get, which I doubt you would bother to read or really address, but maybe you will. Cold Case Christianity, a homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels by J. Warner Wallace.
Starting with the first chapter, because that's how it usually goes, it's pretty much just saying that materialists or naturalists presuppose that everything is material or natural, despite any indication otherwise, and quotes a rather controversial evolutionary biologist with some unpopular opinions, who basically says the same thing. While I can't speak for everyone who considers himself a naturalist, I consider myself one, not because I've decided that to be the case, but because I don't see any indication that there is anything supernatural, so it's not really going to seem very likely to me that any particular thing is caused by something supernatural. If I was aware of adequate proof of anything spiritual, then yes, I would believe it. But until I see that, I'm not going to think that houses are haunted by ghosts, or mental illness is caused by demons, or that animals are complex because God made them that way, or that a God died and resurrected. That doesn't seem very likely to me. And believe it or not, I am open to the idea of supernatural or spiritual things. But the issue is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. On either page 25 or 26, I don't know, Kindle's kind of confusing, it says this: scientists aren't alone. Many historians are also committed to naturalistic presupposition. The majority of historical scholars, for example, accept the historicity of the New Testament Gospels insofar as they describe the life and teaching of Jesus and the condition of the first century environment in which Jesus lived and ministered. But many of these same historians simultaneously reject the historicity of any of the miracles described in the New Testament, in spite of the fact that these miracles are described alongside the events that scholars accept as historical. Why do they accept some events and reject others? Because they have a presuppositional bias against the supernatural. That's a bit of a loaded question. While there is some historical indication of some things in the Bible, like the idea that Jesus was baptized, or that he was crucified, or that there were lots of people who followed Jesus, that doesn't then mean that Jesus actually healed blind people. According to historians, the Gospels were written at about 40 years after Jesus died, from passed down tradition. The anonymous authors of the Gospels were not there, and there's no reason to take their claims uncritically. That doesn't make us biased. Christians are often accused of being biased simply because they believe in the supernatural. No, not quite. Believing in supernatural things isn't a problem in and of itself, but it does affect how one views reality. Simple coincidences, or things that are improbable or lucky, for lack of a better word, could be interpreted as divine intervention, whereas critics or skeptics wouldn't see any indication of such. And devout Christians do often accept and reject information selectively to affirm their own presuppositions, as is the case in creation science. Christians are capable of the very thing that you are accusing us of. But I am interested in looking at things objectively, as you say that we should. Here we have an image that compares dangerous presuppositions for jurors and truth seekers. Here's the latter. Nothing exists outside the natural realm. If it can't be tested with my five senses, it doesn't exist, and supernatural explanations must be eliminated. Well, I don't know how many people hold these beliefs or ideas, but I sure don't. It's not that I know for sure that there is nothing supernatural, but instead, again, that I don't see any indication of such, so it doesn't seem reasonable for me to think that there is. And it's not that I know that there absolutely is nothing that we cannot test with our five senses or with machinery, but instead that if I can't prove that something exists, I don't know that it exists. And it's not that we must eliminate supernatural explanations, but instead that they're so unlikely that they're virtually impossible, since we first have to prove that there is anything supernatural in order for it to adequately explain anything. You say that your commitment to naturalism prevented you from considering the possibility of miracles, but that's the thing. I'm not committed to materialism as much as I am convinced of it, and if you have evidence to the contrary, be my guest.